have you ever say no to an investor who actually wanted to put money like millions of dollars and you said no because we don't click?
Yeah, no, it has happened.
Can you give like 5 things that you need to do in order to raise fund successfully? Sekolah Sukses dimulai. Sebagai pemilik bisnis, tantangan terbesar kita adalah membuat customer kita kembali berkali-kali terus-terusan untuk membeli produk atau memakai jasa kita. Dan seringkali kita memakai ads atau iklan, menggunakan influencer, tapi ternyata tidak tepat sasaran. Padahal sudah menghabiskan budget yang gede banget, jutaan rupiah. Jadi apa nih kira-kira yang harus kita lakukan untuk membuat customer kita datang lebih dari sekali? Ya gak mungkin dong kayak terus-terusan kasih diskon atau kasih promo. Gimana caranya merubah dari customer menjadi super fans untuk produk kita atau jasa kita? Dan itu dia kenapa gue mengundang mentor kita hari ini di Sekolah Sukses. Tempat di mana kita belajar tentang arti kesuksesan yang mungkin tidak diajarkan di sekolah pada umumnya. Mentor kita kali ini adalah seseorang yang luar biasa banget dan langsung datang dari Korea. Pasti kalian tahu dong, roket internet, Zalora, Lazada, dan juga Qraved. Nah, dia ini yang bikin. Dan sekarang, dia baru aja bikin sesuatu yang berguna banget buat kalian para entrepreneur. Apalagi yang punya usaha F&B, beauty clinic, sampai barbershop. Yuk, kita ngobrol banyak sama dia. Karena mentor kita adalah orang Korea, jadi gue akan ngobrol dalam bahasa Inggris dengan beliau. Nah, kalau kalian saat ini mendengarkan di podcast kita di Spotify Sekolah Sukses, kalian bisa juga loh mampir ke YouTube channel kita di mana kalian bisa klik tombol CC supaya bisa baca subtitle bahasa Indonesianya. So, murid-murid Sekolah Sukses, keluarkan buku catatan kalian atau mungkin bisa tulis di notepad handphone kalian. Mungkin kalian juga harus menonton ini 2-3 kali ya, karena banyak sekali hal-hal yang baik yang bisa kalian ambil untuk diterapkan di bisnis kalian juga. Langsung aja mentor kita, Steven Kim. Hello Steven, how are you?
Hello Daniel, thank you very much for having me.
Bro, thank you so much for saying yes. Like, we don't get mentors like your caliber, to be honest, in this show. So really, this is such an honor for us that you're here. Jadi, permasalahannya ya, di setiap bisnis itu, kadang-kadang bisnis itu sering banget spending on ads ya. Jadi mereka beriklan untuk ngedapetin customer baru. Nah, cuman sayangnya customer baru akhirnya ngecek, tapi mereka nggak stay gitu. Mereka sering banget paling cuma nyobain sekali dan habis itu nggak balik lagi. Kadang-kadang malah lupa atau mungkin karena nggak diingetin juga gitu sama business ownernya. Jadi menurut gue ini episode yang paling bagus banget buat kalian para founder, buat kalian para business owner, atau mungkin kalian adalah seorang entrepreneur, atau kalian mungkin bekerja di sebuah marketing agency dan mungkin di marketing timnya juga gitu dari sebuah perusahaan tersebut. Nah, yang pastinya hari ini kita akan ngobrol lebih dalam lagi sama Steven tentang bagaimana sih untuk mendapatkan customer relationship management atau bagaimana kita bisa keep customer untuk terus kembali lagi ke bisnis kita terus dan terus atau yang kita bilang itu repeat customer supaya terus mendapatkan long term profit. So anyway, Steven, this is so exciting. How long have you been here in Indonesia, by the way?
It's been over 12 years now.
Over 12 years. Wow.
Coming here as a single man, and now a married man, a family with 2 boys.
Wow.
Happy being here in Indonesia.
Yeah. But you founded Zalora, you founded Rocket Internet in Southeast Asia, and yet you choose to move to Indonesia. If I have that capacity and that capability, and of course that caliber, I would move back to Korea if I were you, and start something there. Why Indonesia and not Korea for you?
So the experience that I saw building Rocket Internet from Singapore, and we expanded Zalora to 7 countries. So it was Indonesia, Malaysia, Vietnam, Philippines, Hong Kong, Taiwan. What am I missing? But it was Southeast Asia, and when we kind of expanded it, it's a much bigger market. So Korea at the time internet was already penetrated. A lot of like services, e-commerce was already getting built.
Right.
Whereas in Southeast Asia, it was still very, very new.
Why was Indonesia desirable for you at that time as a single man?
Not that aspect didn't play a part. But Indonesia was cool. I came because of first curiosity, because it's such a big country. Population's huge. At the time, I only knew Bali, and it was and from the numbers in 2012, Singapore, the ranking of number of orders on Zalora was Singapore, Malaysia, always 1 and 2, and then maybe Thailand, Vietnam, Philippines, and Indonesia all fighting it out on the lower side.
Right.
And for me, that didn't make any sense.
Yeah.
Like Singapore's 5 million people. This is 250 million people.
Right.
Why is it like multiple times different?
True.
And so the reality was that I was curious, and the Rocket Internet managing director in Indonesia was willing to invite me to like, hey, just come over and see Indonesia. And I came over. At the time, I luckily also met Kevin Alui, who was also with the Zalora team. And it was, and when I first landed in Indonesia, 2012, the first time I met somebody, I realized why the orders were lower is that nobody had smartphones. Not a lot of computers.
Right.
Everybody was on BlackBerry.
Yeah.
Right. And so that's why there wasn't a lot of discovery. There wasn't a lot of Google search. There wasn't a lot of other things to attract customers.
Right.
And so that was really interesting of, oh my God, this must change soon at some point in the future.
Right.
But then secondly, the interesting thing was Indonesians were so friendly and social.
Right.
Right. It was a BlackBerry era, but like, you meet somebody and then they're like, hey, give me your BB pin.
Right.
Right. And then you would just connect. And it was just such a social and young, vibrant culture. And that just made it like, okay, it's a big market. It's before the curve of technology adoption. And people are super adoptive.
Yeah.
And that was like, okay, like it's worth a bet to give it a try.
Wow. So again, why did you choose to build in Indonesia and betting on Indonesia rather than Korea?
Right. So Korea has been digital for many years, and Korea is a much smaller country than Indonesia, only 50 million people.
Yeah.
But still, Korea has a lot more infrastructure, a lot more technology and data that is being used on a daily basis. And that allows them to either be F&B, like KFC, they have tens of thousands of KFCs. Right, even if it's a smaller country.
In 50 million population country.
Yeah, so there's so many franchises that have over 1,000 outlets.
Wow.
In Indonesia, it's not that common to have more than 1,000 outlets, even for the biggest brands.
Right.
And so that's something that I believe that Indonesia will eventually get to it. And I think the challenge for Indonesia has been that technology and data has not been used in a lot of these offline retail environments. And therefore, everybody's just guessing. They just build a store, they do some promotions, and then they just wait and see. Right. And they don't really engage with the local community. It's not like somebody's really working really proactively to understand, oh, this neighborhood has this characteristic, and they should be serving their customers like this. And obviously, because everything has been manual, it's been much more difficult for each area or neighborhood to optimize for itself. Yeah. And of course, the challenge is that the technology is just not there and has not been there.
You're right. I think a lot of us, me as an entrepreneur, when we build something, we just hope. We just hope that it will sell. We hope that because we give good promotions, people will come back. They will usually come back if we give them discounts. And we just hope with cool branding, there will be FOMO enough to get it to come back to us. Everything for what I just said is just hoping without any data-driven backup.
I think a lot of new Indonesian companies are doing a really great job in making this kind of move towards using data. Yeah. I think Dana is a very good example. Vincent from Dana, he has this point of view that technology and data is going to advance Indonesia, and it's really impressive. And I'm honored to be one of the kind of forces to be in that journey to help Indonesia really upgrade and unlock the true potential of Indonesia,
Right.
At least domestically, with more technology and data.
Stephen, when I remember I met you in one event and you were actually the founder of Qraved at that time, right?
Yes.
Could you tell me more about that startup? Was that also data driven, and what was that about?
We were a bit early, indeed, because back then it was very hard to even get basic tablets into people's hands and all that kind of stuff. But we were on the mission to first help restaurants to really get connected with their customers online through websites, through social media, through application, to be easily discovered. If you have a new menu, if you have a new outlet, if you have a new concept, get that word out to the world.
Right.
And that was kind of why we started Qraved. And we were using a lot of data-driven approaches.
Okay.
Because we, obviously Indonesia, 280 million people,
Right.
a lot of different people.
Yeah.
Right. So not everybody likes Japanese. Not everybody likes
Thailand.
kaki lima.
Right.
Like, so we have this huge spectrum of customers. And at our peak, we had about 3 million monthly active users. And they were coming to us for various different reasons. Some were coming to us for couple date night inspiration. Some
Right.
people are coming for what's the legendary eatery, kaki lima,
Right.
bakso place or whatever. So it was a lot of variety of different people, and we were trying to personalize that experience,
Right.
based on what they did before.
Right. So, how was that during the pandemic, though?
Now I can laugh. Yeah. So the pandemic, I mean, I think everybody that was in the retail industry or F&B industry shares the pain.
Yeah.
I still remember April 2020. It was a shock. And then it was like just pausing to see, okay, what do we do?
Yeah.
We can't go out.
Yep.
And restaurants can't open for 2 months or so, I remember.
Right.
So I'm messaging all our clients, all my bros, friends, owners, like, what are you guys doing? Like, what should we do? What should we do? What should we do?
Wow.
And it was just pure panic.
Yeah.
And we ended up just locking down for like 2-3 months, just just hit on our heads without options. Like, it was like, what are we going to do? And then I think it was only like 2-3 months later that we realized, we essentially, me and my co-founders were talking about, okay, we just can't give up. Like, we're not that style. We had these people need help. Right? Because, okay, they can't open their restaurant. Like, they went from whatever, 1M, 500 million, whatever homestead they have, now to zero.
Yeah.
We got to help them. Right.
Yeah.
So that's why we started to build more commerce technology when Qraved didn't have a lot of that. So ordering, payments, integration with Gojek or Grab for delivery.
Right.
And we were just trying to do different things.
Right.
And so it was super painful, but that kind of also gave me this inspiration where, okay, like, helping people aware about something is just not enough. Right. And the new trend comes and goes.
Yeah.
So you can help brands to be like, oh yeah, they have a new menu, they have a new promotion, but then that's only 3 to 6 months.
Yeah.
And then it's just not sustainable. So that, I think, was the kind of point in time that I was hit in the face, to just kind of take a step back and relook at, okay, how do we really help businesses and solve a significant problem?
Wow.
And that, I think, got us to steps to here where now we build Yobo. Yeah.
Okay. So at the same time, when Qraved sort of tumbling down and falling, it was like the birth and the rise of Yobo itself. Then what is Yobo?
Yeah, so Yobo is an AI-powered sales CRM that helps.
What is CRM?
Yeah, right. It's a customer relationship management solution.
Okay.
Which is essentially just saying it's a sales and marketing tool.
Okay.
So it's an AI-powered sales and marketing tool that helps offline and online businesses to sell more using WhatsApp. And now the cool thing is with AI, with ChatGPT and DeepSeek and all these things coming out, we believe in the next 12, 18 months, a lot of the things that we are doing manually or we're just not doing because we don't know how to do it, it's too difficult. We're going to be able to do it with AI. And so in the next 3 years, if you're not doing something with AI, you're gonna fall behind, right? Wow. And it's going to be very challenging to compete against your competitors, because some businesses are focusing on that, and that's just going to be further away. So you don't have to have somebody manually typing. You don't have to have them send the exact same message over and over again, right? Because now you can, like, with the press of a button, you can send out messages to thousands of people, and then today you send video A. And then tomorrow you send another video, a different video, and then you might send another poster. Wow. So it's so much easier to, and then you'll actually see, 1,000 people sent, how many people read it, and how many people actually came to my store or my web shop, and then how many actually bought something, and how much was the omset. Right. So it gets really, really interesting and simple. So it's a very effortless way to really reach your customers. And at least the high value ones that will buy, if you nudge them, they'll know at least you have a promotion. They'll know you have a new product. They'll know you have some kind of campaign. And that's always the issue that a lot of my business owner friends always talk about. It's like, oh yeah, my marketing team did all this planning. Nobody knows. Right? Even in the malls, like every mall has some kind of campaign. Even if you follow them on Instagram, it's very hard to see it. Right? Because there's just too many other types of content on Instagram. And TikTok. So it's if you want to get promotion updates or new kind of product updates, it's much more easier with direct.
So me as a business owner, then whoever business owners or entrepreneurs who's watching right now, which one do you think is more important? Like blasting as many ads as possible, like injecting so much capital to put ads out there, sponsored ads on social media, or reminding your customers to come back to you?
Right. No, so I think I don't have anything against ads. I think ads are good if you can target it to the right people. You found the right channel, it makes sense. But the problem is if they come and go and they only choba and then they never do a repeat order, then you just wasted your money. And so there's a lot of reports related to why is it more important to retain customers than get new customers. The main problem is cost. It's 5 times more expensive to get new customers and than getting repeated customers. And also, repeated customers spend at least 50% more than new customers because they like the brand. I like this. I order more, or I spend more money on this versus my first time. I just want to get the cheapest thing, and so on and so on. So, and there's a study from Bain that if you increase your retention by 5% only, you can almost double your profits.
Wow.
Right? So your omset might not go up that much, but your profitability will go up almost double. So if you're making 50 million rupiah per outlet a month right now, you'll make 100 million rupiah. If you're making 100 million rupiah, now you'll make 200 million rupiah by just making sure that your customers are not just going out the door and forgetting about you and looking for the new next thing. They just remind you, maybe 2 months later, 3 months later, so that customer not only just does 1 transaction a year, but maybe 2 transactions a year, maybe 3 transactions a year, and so on and so on. So it makes it much more cheaper to drive sales and, of course, get profits.
So do you have like an example? I mean, Yobo has been here for about a year and a half now. So you've worked with a few brands as well. And I'm sure it's not only just F&B. You probably worked with beauty clinics. You mentioned beauty clinics and retail stores and whatnot. What are the impact for them using Yobo?
For mass chain restaurants, we've seen great success. One of the biggest success cases at scale is DeCost.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's a mass market, seafood, a very traditional name, a long-time player. And some people thought they were not so relevant anymore because they weren't in the advertising scene so much anymore, but are pretty active in social media. And so we teamed up with them because they also valued the relationship between customers and the brand, and that they see that their customers, they appreciate the D-Cost products. And if they are reminded, they would come back once a month or once every 2 months at least. And they felt like, okay, just running ads on Instagram, just trying to blast or post things on Instagram organically just wasn't reaching their customer base. So when they joined us last year, July, 65 outlets nationwide, it was not an easy thing because there's so many different customers everywhere.
Right.
But they're now seeing over 2,000% ROI, good growth. Their staff is amazing. Their management is amazing. Very geared towards, okay, we have a good product. We want to make a better product. We want to be closer to our customers. And I think that dedication paired up with now technology, WhatsApp, and data insights that we can give them, they're being able to be like, oh, okay, we know what we should do next. And that's, I think, always everybody's challenge. I think everybody feels like, what should we do? Okay, Ramadan, sales is down. Right? Unless you're the really buka puasa segment, right? So like coffee shops, bakeries, ice cream places, they're struggling, but and that's the key thing to understand. Okay, what should we do in April? What should we do in May? What should we do in June? And we're heading into the slowest time in 2025. April until November, it's going to be, there's no holiday, there's no big event. So for any consumer business, any retail, any F&B, they're all going to not have a good excuse to run ads or not have a good excuse to do campaigns. So the best way is to do direct, and that's something that we see to give great results.
And I think as a customer, when you mentioned that, I feel like it's not that I don't want to buy the product anymore or I get distracted by other competition. It's just that sometimes I just forgot. Right, I just need to get a reminder. Right, to get reminded of the brand, and I just need to. Especially, I love this pies so much, right? I told you about it before, and sometimes they reminded me that they're having a special for end of the month special, or every Monday or Wednesday you can get like free pies, right? And because of that, I just tell my assistant to buy it, But again, it's not that I don't want to buy anymore. It's just that I forget. And I think business owners, sometimes you need to think, how can you remind your customers again and again about that you exist, that you still exist, and that you're having a promotion. But if you're doing it through randomly on social media, sometimes it just doesn't hit the right target. And you're right. What the biggest problem is, like it costs 5 times more to acquire new customers rather than repeating customers to come back to you. So yeah, that's the most effective and efficient way. You are the OG startup founder, right? I would say that about you, right? Because you co-founded Zalora, you co-founded Rocket Internet in Southeast Asia. You co-founded Qraved, and now you co-founded Yobo as well. So you have that founder mentality. You go out there talking to investors, raise funds for the business and all that, right? Now, and you've been doing this for more than 12 years. During your time as a startup founder, I think there's so many things going on. We're talking about WeWork, how it was the rise and fall of WeWork. They even make a documentary about it. There was this, I forgot her name. Yeah, this lady who came up with this blood test, but turns out it's all just a scam. And then, going closer to home, actually in China, there was that coffee brand thing as well, which was a huge scam. And in Indonesia, closer to home, with what happened with e-fishery and Infestry, right? there's being a startup founder in Indonesia would be, I think, more challenging, especially that it's already a tech winter. A lot of my friends who are startup founders, they're like, man, I don't know, they just keep complaining, right? For you, how do you see the atmosphere like from 12 years ago until today? And for Yobo, for your current business, are you still raising funds? And are you still able to raise funds, right? So
yeah. So I think fundraising, I think it's an interesting practice, I would say. So some people say it's a science, it's an art. Can you learn it? Are you born with it? Kind of thing. But I think the key thing is that the trend and the focus, what investors have been looking at, has changed throughout the years, right? So back in my Qraved days, it was all about active users, right? So how many monthly actives, how many daily active users do you have was a litmus test of, are you going to be successful or not?
Right.
So we were scaling users. It was all about growth. Grow users.
Right.
But the reality was, and the rationale behind it is like in China, if you have users, you can monetize it someday.
Yeah.
In the US, if you have users, you can monetize it someday.
Right.
The reality was that we had users, but it was really hard to monetize, right? In Indonesia. And because of different type of industry situations and whatnot, I think we're kind of living through another era, which is a lot of investments during COVID. Because that was kind of the golden era for venture capital.
True.
Right. And startups. So getting so much money, funding, big success stories. And I do think the situation that is happening now, you could say it's a negative situation, but I think it's a positive situation for the future. Okay. Because again, in the same topic, it's about the long term, right? And it is a fact, I think it is a reality that a lot of the startup founders were so pressured for growth. We were not in a position to really think about compliance. We were not thinking about fraud. We were not thinking about keeping everything safe because it was all about growth. Yeah. And that was what the whole industry was focusing on. And I think this correction is also making more awareness that, hey, guys, like you're handling a lot of money.
Yeah.
So you should really, really, one, you shouldn't be fraudulent, but two, you need to put in the right places so that you're preventing things that are out of your control as well. Yeah. And I think that's something that is a big change that's going to happen and is already happening. Right. Because the investors are not going to be like, oh, it's a bad market. I should change my occupation. Yeah. Right. They're still going to invest. Yeah. It's just that they're going to be much more picky on who they invest into. That's good. And I think that's good for the industry because I think even a few years ago, what I experienced, and now being a OG and an older person, like investors just didn't look at me because they wanted to invest into that 25, 26-year-old that just graduated from Stanford, crazy, that has a good idea, that did computer science, and I want to give him $5 million. Yeah. When older people with more experience with an actual business, the growth is too slow for them, or there's just revenue that if there's no, and there's a funny clip in a Netflix kind of show, you shouldn't make revenue because if you make revenue, now you're a revenue making company and they'll ask for more and they'll ask for how much and then it will never be enough. So that's why you need to be pre-revenue. Right? Wow. And then they won't know how much revenue you're going to make. Wow. Right? So I think there was an era of that. Yeah. Where crazy. It was all about investing in that 26, 27-year-old young kid that has a good idea, that's going to work hard. Yeah. Right? Yeah. I think that has changed. I think now, because the investors are looking at businesses that make money, that make revenue, but also profitable revenue, right? And it's not okay to just give a discount and make your product so cheap or give it out for free, which a lot of businesses, including myself, at different times we did. So give it out for free so that they can use it. Yeah. It's good for the customer for sure, but then they didn't invest into anything. So it's so easy for them to throw it away as well.
True.
I got it for free. I throw it away for free.
Yeah.
Right. So that's been what has been going on. And even if it's the tech winter, even though what's happening in the Indonesia startup scene, I still see a lot of investors that are still looking for good deals.
Okay.
They are willing to invest. They just have different points of view on what they want to invest into. So it's not the next shiny thing anymore. It's really about, at least the ones that I talk to that are more somewhat optimistic, and they still see that, hey, at the end of the day, like this venture capital as a investment class, it's really about making change. And as long as the business is a sound business that actually has margin that somebody wants to pay for, right? Which means you have to solve a big problem. You can't just fake a problem, right? For instance, and you need to really solve somebody's problem that is willing to pay for. And that's why we also we are working with our clients at a mutually respectful rate. We're not the cheapest in the market. We're not the most expensive in the market.
Right.
We believe we're reasonable, comparable to any manpower that they need to hire anyway.
Right.
But because we're charging, of course, we won't be able to onboard thousands of new merchants every month.
Right.
But we onboard the cautious ones that really want to create value, and they're not wasting their time. They're not wasting our time.
Yeah.
That just kind of fake traction, which I think a lot of us ended up having to do, right? And so that, I think that's the big change in the investor landscape, is that they want revenue, they want profitability,
right.
They want sustainability, right? And a business model that will grow with that. And obviously that one needs a bit more experience, a bit more scars.
Right. There you go.
To realize and not fake yourself into this illusion that, oh, everything's going to be good.
Yeah.
It's going to grow. Everything's going to be perfect. Even though I give it up for free, I'll make money someday. That's not the day anymore.
Steven, based on your own experience, okay, ini misalnya ada startup founder, all right? If there is this, if our viewers right now, he's a startup founder or she's a startup founder, and they want to raise fund, can you give like, I don't know, 5 things that you need to do in order to raise fund successfully for the startup founders?
I won't be able to represent the whole market, but at least my experience right now, the market feels like the investors need a lot more proof. So I think what is most important in the short term when you're just starting off is really kind of be as bootstrapped as you can, be cautious about your cost as much as you can. Just because like revenue is something that is very difficult to achieve, but cost is fully controlled by you. Right? So you bring that down as much as you can, kind of resist the kind of temptation of spending money on things, the nice fancy things. That's number one. I think number two is that you need to be working on a problem that you can actually solve, and you can get some proof in a short period of time. There are different ways to do this. One of our investors, Antler, runs a program where individual people can team up and build a startup and try it out for 6 to 12 months and see if they can get fundraised. I think that those kind of programs, and the Antler program is very good for people that want to become a startup founder. They don't know the problem that they want to solve. They don't have co-founders yet, but they want to be an entrepreneur someday. I think it's a great opportunity to join Antler program. To really solve a problem that you can that is meaningful. Thirdly is you got to generate revenue. You need to find somebody that's willing to pay, not willing to use. I think that's the big difference, right? So back in the day, I think it was okay enough if somebody was really willing to use it, that was enough. And if you can get enough people to use it, there's a way to make it work. But right now with the landscape, because everybody's so focused on revenue, it does seem like that is one. Another one, I guess, is look at either, I think a few categories right now are getting quite a lot of investment, is like actual consumer businesses that sell direct to customers, those ones are actually getting funding because there is revenue.
Right.
Right. So it's not tech driven.
Yeah.
Like a restaurant chain or a clinic or something like this is not a tech business, but still it generates revenue. And so as long as you can find a niche that serves a big enough market, that with funding you can go there faster.
Yeah.
Sorry. Then I think it's still meaningful.
Yeah.
I think another category that is very exciting right now is B2B, which like Yobo is kind of in the B2B2C space, where this space, we don't have to spend money to get customers, right? Qraved, we had to spend money to get users so that we can get money, right? Gojek, same thing. Zalora, same thing.
Yeah.
We had to spend money to get users and then we could monetize. B2B is that you just need to work with certain companies and clients and solve their problem. And then as long as you have a unique skill set that can solve their problem, it's worth their investment, it's cheaper than their alternatives, then you make money. And that's something that I think investors really appreciate now, that you're solving a problem that has an actual customer that's willing to spend and you actually make margin.
That's good. How do you deal with investors? I know some friends who are being enslaved by investors, right? Like being whipped in the back because, they don't meet the sales target or they don't meet the revenue, they don't meet the whatever, right? The traction and the app downloads or whatever. So how do you deal with investors in a healthy way?
I think number one is not all investors are equal, right? So investors are different, right? So I think step number one is similar to finding partners, even your wife or husband kind of partner. I think investors are kind of like marriage in a way. You got to approach it kind of like that because you're going to live with that person for at least the next 10 years, right?
Yeah.
Because that's how the investment thesis works. So you got to really click in a certain way. It's not just money. And unfortunately, sometimes you're as a founder, you're stuck in a situation where this is the only money I can get, but I don't click, right? And those situations are very difficult to overcome later on as well. But I think step number one, as like getting a good partner, selecting the right person to begin with, I think is very, very important.
Have you ever say no to an investor who actually wanted to put money, like heaps or loads of money, like millions of dollars, and you said no because we don't click?
No, it has happened.
Oh, really?
In the Qraved era, yes.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so it is something that does exist.
Okay.
And luckily we were privileged to be in that situation. We luckily had great investors that supported us.
Right.
Wow. But yeah, I think one is like you need to find the right investors that share the right values, share the right trajectory of the business, right? Similar to finding a partner.
Yeah.
But secondly, even with married couples, we fight.
Right.
We disagree and we have different opinions. I think the same thing with investors as well, where like somebody might want growth, somebody might want revenue, somebody might want profitability, somebody might want compliance. And all of that, I think, is something that you have to have a proactive conversation and constant alignment. Even in the Qraved days, we would meet at least a quarter physically, the board, to like jam through different topics, and we would have heated conversations that everybody had a different opinion. But as long as we agree on that opinion, it goes back down to execution, right? So if you disagreed with that plan, you got to speak up. If you agreed on that plan, like you got to do everything in your power to actually achieve it. Yeah. And of course, if you shortfall that, there will be repercussions. Hopefully, you have enough runway that you can make another mistake or make a few mistakes, as you might have. Like we see with Elon Musk, it wasn't a mistake, but like the few rockets that they shot up and blew up. Yeah. Right. If it was all about performance, like up to the rocket that worked, everything was a failure.
That's true.
In a way. And they blew away billions of dollars. Yeah. Right. But they just kept on going. They had the runway. They had the runway for that last rocket. It worked.
Yeah.
And therefore they got more. So it's this funny thing. Being a founder is like it's so much extremes on a daily basis.
Yeah.
Happiness and angry, sadness. Like you're going like through this roller coaster every single day. And then once you get something right, then you're praised. Like Elon Musk, like he was praised of like maybe even a year ago.
Right.
Yeah. And then now, because with Doge, he's like hammering around and so on. And now people are like shooting at Tesla stores and crazy stuff. So it's like, I think a founder journey is really, really tough. And you just need to have your sense of location, sense of being. Obviously, having a religion helps, and having faith helps to stay sane.
Yeah,
because
with the whole extreme
some of the crazy
day,
some of the crazy things that happen, and then you hear. Plus, some of it is true, some of it is not true. Like I've had a lot of things talked about me that was not true, but it just is said, and then people believe it.
Yeah,
and I'm sure, like being a public figure, you live through that as well. And so that's why I think the founder-investor relationship is really it's like a couple. It's like a life partner that you gotta know how to press each other's buttons.
So Stephen, I know that there are a lot of business owners, startup founders out there, or entrepreneurs, and they all probably want to know like how can I be connected to Yobo even, right? And what can you tell them?
Right. If you want to sell smarter and you want to use WhatsApp, which 280 million or more people are using in Indonesia, it's an application that everybody uses every single day, every single hour. So if you're not on it as a business, you're missing out, right? And so don't only spend your time thinking about creatives on Instagram or whatever not. Try to look at your old Instagram content, your videos and whatever you made. On Instagram, it only lives 24 hours. On WhatsApp, it lives forever. You can show that video and everything to your customers, every new customer that joins you. And so what we're seeing is this revolution of changing from Facebook to Path to maybe Twitter and Instagram to TikTok and now WhatsApp.
Right.
And WhatsApp is the next future, especially for businesses. Yeah. And we've seen this in China with WeChat, in Korea with Kakao, and in Japan and Thailand with Line. It's a tool that businesses really need to embrace. And you're going to be able to get amazing ROI, like 2,000-3,000%, where Instagram will be like, you'll be happy with 300%, right? And it's just uncomparable to use WhatsApp. And I think what Meta is doing with their development in this direction is amazing. So WhatsApp membership, WhatsApp sales and marketing automation is definitely something that's going to change your trajectory in 2025. So feel free to DM us on Instagram, message me on LinkedIn, and just connect. And you'll be blown away what the possibilities are.
One last question. What is your definition of success?
My definition of success is really solving a problem, solving a big problem for that is really desperately needed. And I think making money is something that just follows that. And as long as there's enough people that share that problem, that feel the pain of that problem, and they really desperately want to solve it, and if we can become that business that does that, I think that is a successful endeavor and vision and mission that we're on to really, really unlock the true potential of every creative mind. Because everybody, when they start their own product or business, they have an ambition, they have a hope, and they just don't have the ability or the technical access to actually make it a reality. And that's success for us. If we can really help other people really achieve their goals, achieve their dreams, and make their lives a bit easier getting there, that would be success for us, or for me.
I love that. So thank you so much, Stephen Kim. This is our mentor for today. And mudah-mudahan kalian semua belajar ya. Semua murid Sekolah Sukses bisa belajar dari apa obrolan kita hari ini. Bahwa ternyata lebih efisien dan efektif untuk repeat customers dan bukan coba nge-acquire new customers. Karena ya cost-nya itu 5 kali lebih tinggi. Dan kita sendiri juga selalu mikir bagaimana caranya supaya customer kita yang tadi dari customer menjadi super fans.
Exactly.
Dan untuk membangun relationship tersebut udah pasti mungkin bisa menggunakan layanan Yobo yang tadi tuh. Kalian bisa langsung DM aja. Tapi yang pastinya kepada semua para entrepreneur, business owners, dan semua dari kita yang sekarang ini lagi hustling banget di tahun 2025. Ya banyak orang bilang kalau misalnya it's gonna be a tough year. Tapi kita sama-sama saling menginspirasi. Kita sama-sama saling encouraging satu sama yang lain. Dan mudah-mudahan kita bisa terus belajar di sini di Sekolah Sukses bersama-sama juga. Keep inspired guys. Bye-bye.